There's a moment that happens to a lot of people somewhere around 44, 45 years old. You're standing in your garage late at night. Maybe it's a Tuesday. The truck is parked there, the one you financed last year. There might be a boat next to it, or a set of golf clubs that cost more than your first paycheck, or just the general weight of a life that, from the outside, looks exactly like success. Your income is the highest it has ever been. Your title at work is real. Your kids are in activities. You've got equity in the house. And somewhere in the back of your head, quiet but persistent, is a voice that says, "I'm not sure I'm actually ahead." That voice is not wrong. Here is the number that explains it. According to Vanguard's most recent How America Saves report, the median 401A balance for workers between the ages of 45 and 54 is $67,796. Not the average, the median. Meaning half of all working Americans at peak earning age, with 2 decades of work behind them, have less than $68,000 saved for retirement. That number tends to land hard the first time you hear it. It should. Hey, I'm Dean. And what I want to decode today is not a list of things you're doing wrong. It's one specific mechanism, the reason why the decade that looks like your financial peak is quietly the most dangerous decade for your long-term financial life. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I call it the peak earnings harvest. Here's how it works. Somewhere between your early 40s and your mid-50s, your income hits its ceiling. Bureau of Labor Statistics data confirms this. Earnings for American workers peak between ages 45 and 54. This is mathematically the most money you are likely to make. And the moment that happens, something else happens too. Your spending recalibrates to match it. This is not a character flaw. It is a completely predictable human response to a higher income. The house needs updating. The car you drove through your 30s finally feels embarrassing. The kids need things. You've earned a few comforts. The lifestyle expands to fill the paycheck, almost automatically. The problem is the timing. Because the decade when your income finally peaks is also the decade when the compounding math on your retirement is most sensitive. A dollar you don't invest at 45 is not just a dollar you don't have at 65. It's roughly $4 at a standard 7% real return over 20 years. Every month that dollar goes toward a payment instead of toward your future, that multiplication disappears. So the wrong number is your salary. The salary is real. It shows up every 2 weeks. It pays the bills. It funds the lifestyle. The real number is the balance sheet. And for most households in this income range, those two numbers are not telling the same story. Let me make this concrete because abstract math is easy to ignore. The average transaction price for a full-size pickup truck in late 2025 was $66,386, according to Kelley Blue Book. That is the average, not fully loaded, not the premium trim, average. Finance it over 7 years at current rates, and you're looking at roughly $900 a month. Add insurance, which is priced high on large trucks and fuel, on a vehicle that gets about 19 miles per gallon, and you're closer to $2,100 or $2,200 a month all in. Over 7 years, that's somewhere north of $90,000 in total cash out the door. Now here's the wrong number versus the real number. The sticker says $66,000. The retirement cost, that same money invested at a 7% real return from age 45 to 65, is approximately $271,000. The truck doesn't cost $66,000. It costs $250,000 in retirement money, paid quietly in monthly installments, during the exact decade you needed that money most. And that's just the truck. The truck is one decision. The peak earnings harvest works because it's not one decision, it's 6 or 8 decisions, each with its own reasonable justification, all running at the same time. This is the mechanism nobody named. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as designed. The truck dealer, the insurance company, the youth sports program, the mortgage broker, each of them profits most when your income is highest, and your attention is on the lifestyle, not the balance sheet. The 40s are not a trap you stumbled into. They're a harvest that was waiting for you. There's a way out of it. But first, you need to see how deep the machine actually goes. If this math surprised you, subscribe. This channel exists specifically for the numbers that don't show up in your paycheck, but show up later, when it's harder to fix them. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus is 46. He makes $108,000 as a year working in operations management for a logistics company outside of Columbus. Good job, stable, been there 11 years. His wife works part-time. They have 2 kids, one is 13 and plays travel baseball. The other is 10 and just started competitive soccer. On paper, Marcus is fine. Better than fine. Here's his monthly picture. Mortgage, $200. Truck payment, $887. Wife's SUV, $540. It's insurance across both vehicles. Youth sports between the two kids' registration, travel, gear, tournament, hotels, roughly $700 a month, closer to $900 in busy seasons. Groceries for a family of 4, $100. Utilities, subscriptions, phones, another $400. Minimum on the credit card they haven't fully paid off since 2021, $180. That's about $6,300 a month in fixed and semi-fixed costs before anyone buys a coffee or fills a gas tank. Marcus's take-home pay after taxes and his 401(n)A contribution, which he bumped to 8% last year and felt good about, is roughly $6,100 a month. He is spending more than he takes home, every month. And he has been for about 2 years without fully realizing it, because the shortfall goes on the card, and the card gets partially paid, and the cycle continues. This is not a story about Marcus being bad with money. Marcus is actually pretty thoughtful. He increased his 401(n)A contribution. He comparison shops for insurance. He knows what a Roth IRA is. The problem isn't knowledge. The problem is that each individual expense in his life made complete sense at the time it was added, and nobody, not his employer, not his bank, not the dealership, had any financial interest in showing him what all of those decisions looked like stacked on top of each other. That's the mechanism. The peak earnings harvest doesn't work by tricking you into one catastrophic decision. It works by making 6 or 7 individually reasonable decisions feel unrelated. The truck made sense because you drive a lot and you've wanted one for years. The travel sports made sense because your kid is genuinely talented and you want to support that. The mortgage refinance made sense because rates were moving and the kitchen really did need work. Each one logical. Together, a system that is quietly consuming the margin you need to actually build wealth. Here's the data point that makes this uncomfortable. That Barber and Odeon study from the Quarterly Journal of Economics tracked 35,000 households and found that the more actively men managed their investments, the worse they performed, underperforming by about 1.4 percentage points annually. Compounded over 25 years, that gap represents roughly 22% less wealth at retirement. More effort, worse outcome. The same dynamic is running on the expense side. The more you optimize individual line items, negotiating the cable bill, finding a slightly cheaper insurance quote, the easier it is to miss the structural problem underneath. You're adjusting the thermostat while the foundation has a crack. And then there's the youth sports piece, which I want to handle carefully, because this one is personal for a lot of people. The Aspen Institute found that average family spending on a child's primary sport is now over $1,000 a year. And for families in travel programs, it runs $3,000 to $5,000, with elite programs pushing past $20,000 annually. A New York Life survey found that 49% of youth sports parents believe their child would earn an athletic scholarship. The actual NCAA data puts the percentage of high school athletes who receive any scholarship partial included at around 2%. That is not a reason to stop supporting your kid. It's a reason to be honest about what you're actually buying. You're buying the experience, the team, the discipline, the Saturday mornings. Those things have real value. But if part of the financial justification in your head is the scholarship, that math does not work, and it's worth knowing that clearly. $5,000 a year for 10 years of competitive youth sports is $50,000 out of pocket. The same amount invested annually at 7% over that period grows to about $69,000. Left to compound until age 65, it becomes roughly $220,000. That's not an argument against youth sports. It's an argument for being honest about the real cost versus the number you're telling yourself, which is the whole trap, really. The peak earnings harvest runs on the gap between the number that feels true and the number that is true. The monthly payment feels manageable. The total cost over time is a different conversation entirely. Marcus, by the way, sat down and actually added it all up last spring. It took him about 45 minutes and a spreadsheet he'd been avoiding for 2 years. What he found wasn't that he was doing everything wrong. He found 3 places where the gap between what some felt like and what it actually cost him long-term term was wide enough to matter. That's where part 3 starts. Because knowing the mechanism is only useful if you know what to actually do with it. So Marcus sat down with that spreadsheet, And the first thing he felt was not motivation. It was embarrassment, which is worth naming. Because I think that feeling is one of the main reasons people avoid doing the math in the first place. It's easier to stay vague than to find out exactly how far behind you are. But here's what Marcus actually found when he looked clearly. He wasn't ruined. He wasn't even close to ruined. He had 3 levers he hadn't pulled yet. And pulling them didn't require him to blow up his life. That's the protocol, not 8 steps. 3. The first one is what I call the total cost conversion. For every major purchase or recurring expense, stop looking at the monthly payment and calculate the retirement cost. Take the total cash out the door over the life of the expense, invest it mentally at 7% over the years until you hit 65, and write that number down. The truck isn't $887 a month, it's $271,000. The whole life insurance policy your buddy pitched you over lunch isn't $530 a month. It's closer to $248,000 because a $334 term policy covers the same family for the same death, and the difference invested for 20 years does that math quietly. You don't have to say no to everything. You just have to see the real price tag before you decide. The second lever is the margin audit, not a budget. A budget is a plan for how you intend to spend money. A margin audit is a hard look at how much distance exists between your fixed monthly obligations and your take-home pay. If that number is under $500, you are one bad month away from the credit card absorbing an emergency. Marcus's audit showed he was actually running negative. Once he saw that clearly, the decision about the next vehicle became a lot less emotional. The third lever is the sequence fix. This one matters more than people realize. If you are in your mid-40s and your 401(k) is underfunded, the order in which you address your finances matters. Paying down a 7% car loan while leaving a 401(n) employer match on the table is mathematically backwards. You're declining a 50% or 100% instant return to eliminate a 7% interest rate. Get the full match first, always. Then address the high-interest debt. Then build the taxable margin. In that order, not the order that feels most satisfying. Now the warning, because this is the part most finance content skips. Some people hear a video like this and overcorrect. They sell the boat, cancel the sports, refinance everything, and start treating every dollar like a moral decision. That's its own kind of trap. Austerity that makes you miserable is not a sustainable financial strategy. It's a different way of avoiding the real problem, which is the structural gap between income, fixed costs, and long-term margin. The goal is not to live like you're broke. The goal is to know the real number and make conscious decisions with it. There's a difference between buying the truck because you want it and understand what it costs, and buying it because the monthly payment felt fine and you never ran the rest of the math. One of those is a choice. The other one is the harvest. And honestly, this is where I think people get blamed unfairly. The system is genuinely good at making the harvest feel like reward. The 40s are framed culturally as the decade you've earned things. The marketing, the financing, the social signaling, all of it is calibrated to the moment your income peaks. You're not weak for responding to it. You're just human. The question is whether you want to be conscious about it going forward. So here's the decoded rule. Peak income is not wealth. Peak income is opportunity, the opportunity to convert earning power into long-term freedom, or to let the system convert it for you into someone else's revenue. The 40s don't decide your retirement, but they do set the trajectory. And trajectory is a lot easier to correct at 45 than at 58. Marcus, for what it's worth, kept the sports. He returned the truck and bought a 3-year-old sedan for $24,000 cash. He's not a different person. He just did the math. If this hit close to home, subscribe. That's the only ask. There's more of this coming, the numbers behind the decisions most people make without ever seeing the real price tag.